Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we want to return to the subject of SIM routers. I don't care whether you are someone that has just come to this subject or have been involved in this in years. I think we can all agree that when it comes to buying a mobile SIM router, it just isn't that straightforward. We're all looking for the holy grail of SIM or LTE routers, because as good as some of them are, there always feels like there's something missing. And I think most users agree that the ultimate holy grail of a SIM router, one, has to support at least 5G connectivity, so you can use it in city centres, airports, but also rural for your 4G and 3G. Next, it's got to have a physical connection. Wireless is great, but I want a physical connection so I can, connect my physical devices and have wireless connectivity. Also, it's got to have a battery. What's the point of a mobile router if it still needs to have some sort of power connected connection physically on site? And also I want to use the latest wireless connectivity, minimum Wi-Fi 6, but at least Wi-Fi 6E on a good day, or Wi-Fi 7 going into the future. And of course, the secret fifth one, the one where I want to be able to have a nice polished little GUI and controls on that. That is the holy grail. And right now, even in 2024, the best option in the market that covers all of that is from Netgear, and it's a Netgear M6 and M6 Pro. These came out, particularly one of them, almost 2 years ago, and are changing hands for between $699 and $809, nearly $1,000 to spend on a mobile SIM router. It seems insane. Hence today's video. Because today we are looking at an AliExpress knockoff of that router. That is right. This is the KuWFi. Missing an I there, chaps. This is the KuWFi or KuWFi 5G mobile SIM router that I think we can charitably say is massively ripping off Netgear with this product here. Available on AliExpress right now. We picked this up for £199. The price has fluctuated, but at the moment, at the time of recording, it's about $229. And we're going to look at what this thing is, what it isn't, how it stacks up against the Netgear, for those of you that are wondering, is this $400 to $600 saving worth the compromise? And we're going to go into that software as well. So straight away off the bat, let's take a look at it. Inside, you get your instruction manual, and as you may not be too surprised to hear, it is lackluster in the extreme. Barely anything on there. Not a huge surprise. Also on top of that, we've got the router. We've already powered it on. And inside, alongside the router, you get a USB Type-C to A cable there. It is not a high-density USB 3 cable. This is definitely a USB Type-2 cable. Power delivery is going to be a bit pants. Again, I know it seems like I'm being overtly negative about this product early doors and therefore somewhat biased, but I'll tell you straight now off the bat, that Netgear M6 and M6 Pro is massively overpriced, way too overpriced, costs way too much. Honestly, I'm amazed they're still trying to charge that much. It isn't an iPhone. What are you doing, Netgear? But I will say it is still one of the most unique products in the market, and I think Netgear know that's why they charge as much as they do. But going with this one, roll it down there, we can take a look at the unit itself. That is the KuWFi there on screen. I'm sure right now you're seeing the close-ups there of it, and straight away I'll tell you this feels extraordinarily cheap. I utilised the M1, the previous generation of the Netgear, and I've used the M6 and M6 Pro when I've done travels over to Computex, and I'll tell you right now, that is mostly plastic, but it does utilise a metal dissipation panel inside. This is pure plastic here on the outside. Again, we have an LCD panel sort of there on the front, but it isn't touchscreen. There's nothing you can do with that there. Hopefully on screen you're seeing us going through some of those options. To navigate the options there, kind of classic iPhone style, you've got a button there at the bottom that allows you to physically click between those options, and if you want you can click the WPS code there to get the login information for it. It supports 5G SIMs, and that's nano SIMs that are inserted there on that side panel there on the side there. I will also state along with it, it has got that battery inside. It's rated at 6,000 milliamps, but once we opened the back of this device up, inside we found a slightly lower milliamp battery in there. Now I don't know if that's a conversion thing, but still nonetheless it wasn't the 6,000 milliamp battery that was advertised on AliExpress for this. And also, while we're on the subject, AliExpress and KuWFi, KuWFi, and whatever the store that was selling this, seriously, if you're going to list that many fake good reviews, don't post them all on the same day. That's a rookie error. But Moving forward, it utilises a USB Type-C connector. As mentioned, that's a USB Type-C cable. This device arrived at 35% battery, and within 3 hours it got up to 90%. So again, moderate charging there, going through it, trying to get that to the high performance number. So straight away, let's compare this a little bit about what we know about the Netgear. So straight away, if we had to compare the specifications side by side and we go with the pros and the cons, obviously this is massively cheaper as a, frankly, and I'm going to keep using the word knockoff product. We're not going to be that surprised that it's going to cost that much less. The battery life there on the Netgear M6 and M6 Pro, it was rated, I'm going to read my notes, at 5,040 milliamps there. So arguably a bigger battery on the fake Moody model, but at the same time it didn't rate the description, and what the battery found inside did not fully match up there. Also, this device arrives with Wi-Fi 6, that is the 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz band coverage. It does not utilize the recently unlocked 5.9 gigahertz frequency there, that again requires a lot of loopholes in order to open that up for your product. So I'm not surprised it doesn't have 5.9 gigahertz, but it's still a Wi-Fi 6 dual band at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz there. On top of that, that 5G SIM is obviously backwards compatible as well. All of this pretty much matches the Netgear, although I will highlight the Netgear Pro model, the more expensive model, does arrive with Wi-Fi 6E, which opens up the 6 gigahertz band, which obviously then not only allows you to introduce more active users on those frequencies there for management, but also you can get more of those larger block 80, 160 and 320 megahertz caps there, the little frequency bands. On top of that, alongside that 5G SIM, it does not have an SD card slot. The Netgear had an SD card slot built inside, so again, kind of a, you know, an open goal they missed for there. If they're going to try and clone it, introducing an SD card slot into this would have been very easy in my opinion. I will say, based on the specifications we can see, one advantage that this does bring to the fold is this device arrives with support of up to 128 active users, they state, whereas the Netgear supported up to just 32 active users and devices. Now again, whether that is a question of stability and bandwidth management, I'm not sure. We'll talk about the 5G network controller inside in a moment, but I will highlight this device here arriving with that physical connector there on the base. This arrives with a 1 gig network port there, whereas the M6, although that arrived also with a 1 gig copper port there, it also arrived in the Pro series with a 2.5 gig port. That's kind of one of the main reasons that that M6 Pro, despite its ludicrous pricing, is still kind of the holy grail when it comes to a lot of mobile SIM routers that tick a lot of boxes. Now, I mentioned about the 2 frequencies this thing supports here. I will also highlight alongside those that the network controller inside is a 5G SIM controller. But I will state there is slight differences between them with some pros and cons there. So again, I'm going to have to look at my notes. The Qualcomm SD-X55 versus that of the X62 in the Netgear. They're 2 completely different controllers of a relative same background, but actually quite a lot of time difference released between them. But weirdly, the older generation SIM controller inside this KuWFi Moody Netgear router here actually has a higher performance number on uploads and downloads across the board there. Now that is almost certainly a power efficiency difference on the newer controller there from Qualcomm, the Snapdragon, but still nonetheless, I was kind of surprised with the controller choices there that this actually did provide, at least on paper, that high performance number overall between them. I will also highlight that in terms of physical size and weight, they are identical, almost to the gram, with I think 1 to 2 grams of difference between them in terms of weight, and both of them arriving at 105 millimeters square and the same depth of unit. So clearly a lot of work has gone in to sort of clone and replicate that scale that we've seen there on the Netgear M6 there. And again, given the physical price point, the downsides we've seen thus far, one might argue the saving of between $400 to $600 between the two of them, just within the bubble of comparing these 2 devices. Given we're missing out on 2.5G, given we're missing out on Wi-Fi 6E for Wi-Fi 6, and that we're losing, you know, the kind of glossy, slick front there, and the build quality ever so slightly, there is an argument that, you know, some users are going to see that price difference of $400 to $600 nicker and go, do you know what? Sign me up, buttercup. I can live with those things for $400 to $600 nicker. But what I don't think what you should live with, and also definitely bear in mind, is number 1, This does not feel particularly nice in terms of quality, and if this is knocking around in your bag while you're traveling around, that could make all the difference. And it certainly is not in any way close to weatherproof as the other device. When it arrived, we could see that the plastic rim around the edge had little chunks where the back had clearly been taken out and replaced quite amateurishly. And the result was that I didn't really feel that this device would do very well under, under heavy strain. But we got to talk about the security on this thing, because there is an argument, of course, a lot of people will not buy network products from websites like AliExpress when a lot of their network solutions are produced from very small, uncertified factories in the East that put these products together and just throw them out the door. And there has been talk recently, and a great example would be Magic PC recently, with some of their solutions being actively found to contain spyware in the initial firmware bootloader, in a separate partition there. Now, I'm not able to get that deep into this, and we'll go through the software in a moment, but I will say that in terms of security, if you take your security very, very, very seriously, I would question how much you could rely on a product like this with a brand that seems to have seemingly no real reputational background in a way that Netgear kind of has, and therefore has to live and die by its reputation in that world. But on top of that, although it arrives with support of WPA3, I found absolutely nothing online with regards to a lot of the warranty support on this. And they are a brand that have got a few products knocking around, but you can also find this product with different brand names stuck to the front. So there is a question mark about commitment to security on a product like this long term. And when you're traveling mobile, one of the main reasons you might be going for a mobile router is you don't want to use public Wi-Fi at a local Starbucks or an airport. And therefore, putting all your eggs in another basket, you might be particularly overzealous, particularly scrutinous of security and commitment by brands on solutions like this. I think that's enough of the old jibber jabber. Let's make our way onto this and take a good look at the software on this, and take a little look about the GUI, accessing it via a web browser to see just exactly what level of configuration and control this device presents. Okay, so we've got the device sorted out with a SIM card, and we've connected to it to a couple of devices. I'm using a mobile phone device, and I'm utilising the desktop PC you're seeing there in front of you. All fairly standard stuff. And although I've done a very cursory dip into the software that this includes in the manipulation of the network configuration on this device, I'll say right now, I was never going to go into this and be impressed, and I'll be straight with it, I'm still not impressed. But you know what? After years of looking at different SIM routers, I'm actually going to give this thing the nearest benefit of the doubt and say that it does at the very least provide a base level range of configuration and options for a SIM router that I know a lot of SIM routers in the market do not provide. It's still Billy basic in the extreme, as I'm sure the rather bland user interface you can see there on screen is. But to KuWFi's defense, and clearly they are using a borrowed software platform here, I would still say it is better than I expected. So if we log in here to the user interface, you've got the general information surrounding. You've got your local WAN ID, IP, the DNS, stuff like that I've obviously blocked out. But on top of that, you've got a little bit of information there in the background with regards to usage and data there. And we've already set up a secure connected connection there. You can see our two connected users there. If we go to the next tab there, we've got our simple settings, and my God, do they mean it. You've got your sorting out of your APN, and again, auto matching. There's zero configuration there about sorting out different network providers there with the SIM. You can obviously create them by default, but there isn't the drop-down match that some mobile broadband routers provide you that allow you to flick between some of them. In the mobile network settings area here, as you can see, there is that default APN setting there, and going along into the network configuration, it's all very modular, very basic, but at the very least, there's the odd tip. And in those of you, again, that have followed our reviews of SIM routers in the past, and we've gone to the really basic ones, a little tip like that on screen is a lot rarer than you think. And I know I understand a lot about networking and storage and all this stuff, but a lot of users buying devices like this aren't. So at the very least, they've included that there. But that's also making me wonder whether this is basically a borrowed software that's polished off of freely available open source. But again, from there you can configure what kind of networks you're going to be covering. Most users obviously aren't going to play with that. With regard to the data usage there, I've not used it a great deal, but as you can already see, fairly basic stuff there. There isn't really a speed test, but more on some of the other optional extras with this in just a moment. You've got the pin, and again, that's if you want to attach a pin to get into this. But again, given it has no real touchable interface here on the front, some of these options, as I've been going through, whether they are ones for the admin interface here or ones that are specific to accessing the device generally, it does feel like some of the options in this software menu are not suited to this, which is another reason why I think it's a more generic, bland software that's being applied to this in a kind of what works and what doesn't we'll ignore sort of a way. You've got the usual replay, again pinging the replay. Then again, at least they go to the trouble of explaining some of these things, and along with setting the jumbo frame packets and stuff like that, being able to adapt the MTU. It's not hugely relevant given this is just a 1 GBE box there for the physical connection there, but it's still nice to have that level of configuration. This one really surprised me, and at the end of this I am going to be checking out what exactly eSIM means on this, because I want to know if I select that eSIM option that it states it needs to restart. I want to know whether I select that, whether this is going to introduce the option there to introduce an eSIM, because there's absolutely no mention in the documentation on this about it supporting eSIMs and using an existing subscription and porting it over to the device there. Now moving forward from there, you've got the LAN settings, and do you know what? This is the thing that surprised me the most. This has a reasonably configurable configuration for the wireless network connected network and the wired network. I was kind of surprised that this wasn't where there wasn't an enormous corner cut where you can actually change some of the network packets being exchanged, although arguably when we switch over to the 5 GHz module there and see some of the options, we're lacking a few things, I would argue, for a Wi-Fi 6 router, if you know what I mean. But still, nonetheless, you've got those 32 connected users there, which you can limit if you like, a nice touch. And although, as already discussed, it's said on the documentation that there is no WPA support, there it is, which is just another inconsistency with this device between, is that just the software, not, the software providing this option and the hardware not configuring, or is it something that is available and it's just not been listed there on the marketing materials? Overall, again, it's weirdly consistent in some places and wildly inconsistent in others. When we go through some of the different settings there with the ability to create those two separate wireless connections, again, something that was not mentioned in any of the documentation there. It's really kind of shooting yourself in the foot level stuff here. So let's take a closer look at this eSIM lark. Here we go. It's going to now reset this eSIM, and right now we're going to wait for the system to boot up. It's politely said goodbye to me while the system reboots, and we can find out if this actually can support an eSIM, or this is simply a case of the software not really being tailor-made to this device. So let's fast forward, and no doubt that we're going to see a drop in the connection on the network connectivity there. So what I'll do is I'll bring you back when this device is reconnected to this. Okay, so we've rebooted. We can see there now that our lovely fully fledged connection is now being replaced by that big red X. So let's log in right now and take a close look. And sweet FA, absolutely nothing's going on there. We've got no means to input anywhere in these settings how to input our new eSIM settings. No configuration options and nothing to get in. And what we've basically got while navigating these options is a lot of angry Google dinosaur pages that don't load up. For me, disappointing and, well, frankly, sort of expected. This leads me to what I think is probably one of the most damning things about this device, and means I really am not going to recommend it to anyone. That's the speed. Now, I get it. When you're looking at speed, you're talking about internet speeds, different SIM card providers, 3G, 4G, 5G, where you are in the world and more plays a part. But right now, you can see there on screen that it's telling me I've got 3 bars there, and I've got one connected to device, which is this PC. If we bring up network connectivity there, you can see I've disabled any physical LAN. We're only connected there on the Wi-Fi there, 647 there at the end. Indeed, if we open it up and look at the connected status, we can bring that over there, and we can see we're connected to it. A few minutes there, I did a refresh just to make sure we restarted the SIM and everything. And on top of that, you can see we are connected with a Wi-Fi 6 card. We have got no limitations there to speak of. And if we go in, and again, we can see there we are on the 647. We're on the 5 GHz band. We're using AX. We run a speed test, and this is what we find. Now, On screen, you might be already screaming or getting ready to put in the comments, that's different, Rob. That's the internet speed. You were talking about network before with Wi-Fi 7. That's the internet. That's your SIM card provider. You're living in a terrible area, Rob. Get your hair cut. To which I would say, that's a little bit rude. So, in response to that, I want you to look at this. This is my mobile phone. I disconnected it from that SIM. If I bring that right there to the top, you can see no Wi-Fi symbol. We're not connected to it. If I bring that down there, we can open that up, and as you can see, I'm connected to O2, exactly the same network provider as the SIM card inside this device, in exactly the same physical location. Are you kidding me? Look at it. Look at that. Look at the disgrace that is on the screen next to me, and look at the mobile phone there. You cannot tell me that the SIM card inside this device being O2 and the SIM card in this device being O2, that there is a reason why on screen this is giving me such terrible performance numbers. Alongside the other minor surprise that caught me a little bit off here, I would say that the inclusion of Wi-Fi station, which is basically a glorified hotspot repeater, allows you to connect to existing Wi-Fi networks in your local area environment and utilize them in this, ultimately utilizing this device as a bridge, so you don't even need to put a SIM card in it. So again, little surprises like that. There isn't really any integration of a VPN server gateway on this, or in no means whatsoever with which you could install something like Tailscale or something to work as a gateway, but still nonetheless it's nice. There's an unexpected extra to see in there, and when we dig into the router settings there, everything from, IP filtering, you can even start doing, playing around with your port forwarding, your port mapping, even adding MAC address blocks throughout the course of the software. It's, surprisingly detailed for such a Billy basic cheap looking device. And again, I use the word cheap advisedly because I know there's some of you watching this going, that was nigh on 200 nicker. That's not cheap. But still nonetheless, it's got very basic entry-level parental controls there. Again, enable it into the DMZ, playing around with the NAT settings. I'm just very surprised that this device has got certain features. Obviously, none of these are breathtaking. And I would argue, obviously, the Netgear, with which this is clearly homaging a great deal of its influence from, has a lot more going for it. And if you go over to their own website, they do make a song and dance of comparing it even more with their Netgear-related homage. But even the reference materials I could find on here are pretty bog standard. Indeed, at the bottom, there is a software update feature. I've looked around online. Finding software updates for this, shockingly, are nigh on impossible. And the firmware update section of their own website is absolute DS. Ultimately, between this whole thing, this is a budget system. But I have to at least give them the benefit of the doubt that this software seemingly provides us with a lot more information to go on. So as it may be staggeringly obvious by now, I don't really recommend this device. Why don't I recommend it? Well, even if you move away from security concerns, even if you move away from the fact that they are clearly imitating a branded product and therefore you have to question the motivation behind it, I still think when it comes to buying a portable SIM router, one of the reasons you're doing it is because you need to know that you've got the internet on the fly and you've got it in the most secure fashion possible and the most reliable way possible. Also, and this isn't an advert for Netgear, I'll tell you right now, the Netgear M6 and the M6 Pro are not only wildly overpriced as it is, but also in the last 12 months, we have talked about some phenomenal alternatives to that. We have seen alternatives arrive from brands like D-Link with the DWR. We are talking about devices like the GLI Net, the Pooley AX, still for me one of the most exciting routers that's going to be arriving and should have already arrived here on the studio. What I'm saying is, the holy grail of SIM routers still kind of is the Netgear M6, but not for much longer. And settling on a device like this, just to save yourself 400 to 500 nicker, is not going to be worth it when there are devices rocking out the gate now and very, very soon that, for $200 to $250, maybe $300, that will be an all-powerful SIM router that far overshadow this and the Netgear. This has been a fun video to make, but right now, if you've got yourself one of these and if you're in a window to take it back, do that. But that said, take my elite hat off if you're a home user. If you're someone that's just looking for an affordable means to share some internet connectivity with a few connected users in a small group, this isn't too shabby, and it still ticks a lot of the early boxes. I would just never call it an integral product, and I certainly think it is a device that is cheaper for a reason. But let me know what you guys think. Have you purchased one of these? Are you someone that's considering it? Or maybe you can recommend an alternative to other users in the comments. Let us know below. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. There's links below to other videos we've done on SIM and LTE routers, our buyer's guides, recommended devices that we saw throughout the last few years, the very best that are available right now. And of course, there should be links, thanks to YouTube and the algorithm, telling you about other SIM routers we've reviewed as well. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.